Good evening, and welcome once again to the Quiet Pantheon. I'm glad you're here in this quiet hour at the end of the day. Settle in, let yourself grow comfortable, and still feel the weight of your body sinking down, growing heavier and warmer into whatever holds you. Let your shoulders drop just a little. Let your jaw soften. Let the small muscles around your eyes grow loose and easy. And let your breathing slow, all on its own. In and gently out. In and slowly out. There is nothing you need to do now, nowhere you need to be, nothing left to carry or solve or finish. The day is behind you, and it asks nothing more of you tonight. You do not need to follow every word that I say. You do not need to remember anything at all. My voice is simply here to walk beside you, softly, as you drift down and down towards sleep. Tonight, we come to the great middle of our story, the long, rich years of Thomas Aquinas, at the very height of his powers. The years in which the silent ox, just as his old teacher had promised, began at last to bellow. We will move through it all very slowly, as we always do. Let the words wash over you gentle and warm, like a slow tide on a quiet shore. When we last left him, he was in the city of Cologne, studying at the side of the great Albert. He had been a captive of his own family, and was now free. He had been mocked by the other students as a dumb ox, slow and silent, and had quietly been revealed as a mind of rare and gentle power. And now the years came when that power would pour itself out into the world, like water from a spring that never runs dry. From Cologne, in time, Thomas went on to Paris, the beating heart of learning in all of Europe, the place where the brightest minds of the age gathered, to argue and to teach and to learn. And there, after long years of patient study, Thomas became a master, a teacher in his own right, one of those who stood at the front of the hall and shaped the minds of all who listened. To picture his world, imagine the University of Paris in those days. Narrow streets winding between tall houses, crowded with students from every land you could name. Cold halls of grey stone, where young men sat on straw scattered across the floor, wrapped in their cloaks against the chill, listening, arguing, scratching their notes onto wax tablets and rough sheets of parchment by the light of small windows and smoking candles. The air thick with chalk dust and candle smoke, and the low, steady murmur of Latin, the language of learning, spoken in 100 different accents. It was a place of great public debates. A master would stand before a crowded hall and face a storm of difficult questions thrown at him one after another, and answer them, each in its turn, with calm and order, before the watching crowd. It was a world of fierce intelligence and fierce argument and sharp ambition. Reputations were made and broken in those halls. And into this world came Thomas, calm, enormous, gentle, and quietly, completely unstoppable. Now let us speak of how he worked, for it was truly extraordinary. Even those who knew him well, and saw it with their own eyes, could scarcely believe what they were seeing. Thomas had a mind that could hold many things at once, with perfect order and perfect calm. It is said that he could dictate to several scribes at the very same time. He would speak aloud the words of one work on one subject to one secretary until that thought was complete. And then he would turn to another scribe, sitting nearby, and continue an entirely different work, on an entirely different subject, picking up exactly where he had left it. And then perhaps to a third, holding several great chains of thought in his mind at once, each one clear, each one perfectly ordered, none of them ever tangling with the others. It was as though, inside that quiet head, there were many rooms, and in each room a different work was patiently being built. And he had a gift of deep, total concentration. When Thomas was truly thinking, the whole world seemed simply to fall away from him. The noise, the people, the passing of the hours, all of it faded until there was nothing left but the question before him, and the slow, certain movement of his mind toward its answer. There is a famous story, told and retold for many centuries, of a great feast at the court of the King of France. Thomas had been invited there as a guest, and he was seated among the lords and the ladies and all the noise and colour and glitter of a royal banquet. The candlelight gleaming on silver and gold, the music drifting from the corners of the hall, the rich food and the flowing wine, and the endless ripple of talk and laughter all around him, and in the middle of all of it, Thomas fell silent. He grew still. He was lost in thought, wrestling somewhere deep inside himself with a difficult question that had followed him even to the king's own table. The conversation flowed on around him, bright and busy. The courtiers laughed and talked and paid the large quiet friar no mind at all, and Thomas saw none of it. He heard none of it. He was somewhere else entirely, far away, in the deep and silent country of his own thoughts. And then, suddenly, he brought his great fist down upon the table, so hard that the dishes rattled, and the wine trembled in the cups, and the whole bright room fell silent at once. And he declared aloud, to no one and to everyone, that he had found it. The answer! The settling of the argument he had been turning over. The whole banquet stared at him, startled, forks paused in the air. His friend who had brought him there leaned over and gently reminded him where he was. That he sat at the table of the King of France himself. And Thomas, suddenly aware, was embarrassed and offered his apology. He had simply forgotten for a little while that the rest of the world was there at all. He had been deep inside the great cathedral of his own thought, and he had not meant to be rude. The king, it is said, was not angry. He was charmed, and he asked that a scribe be brought, so that the friar's new thought would not be lost. And what was he building in that great cathedral of thought? This is the very heart of it. This is the work for which the whole world still remembers his name 800 years later. Thomas had set himself one of the most ambitious tasks that any thinker has ever attempted in all of history. He wished to bring together two great rivers, two mighty currents of human understanding that many wise people of his time believed could never meet, that were destined, they thought, to flow forever apart. On the one side, there was the river of faith, Scripture, revelation, the truths held quietly in the heart and in the soul, the things believed but not seen, the things received as a gift rather than worked out as a sum. And on the other side, there was the river of reason, logic, observation, the careful, patient step-by-step philosophy of the ancient Greeks, and above all of Aristotle. The truths worked out, slowly and surely, by the human mind alone, with no help but its own careful thinking. Many people in his age feared these two rivers, and the meeting of them. Some said that reason was a dangerous thing, that the bold new ideas of Aristotle flooding back into Europe would poison faith and wash it away, and so they must be kept far apart, behind high walls. Others leaned so far toward reason and trusted it so completely that faith seemed to slip quietly out of their hands altogether. The two camps argued and worried and watched each other with suspicion. But Thomas believed something quietly radical, something that, in its calm way, would change the shape of thought for centuries to come. He believed that truth cannot contradict truth, that if God is the author of all things, both the wide world that reason studies and the deep revelation that faith receives, then the two can never, in the end, be truly at war with one another. Reason and faith, he believed, were not enemies, circling each other warily. They were two paths winding up the very same mountain towards the very same summit. And so he set out to show it, patiently, carefully, step by careful step. He took the sharp and shining tools of Aristotle's logic, and rather than fearing them, he picked them up and he used them in the service of faith. He wrote vast works, ordered and balanced like great cathedrals of stone, each question examined from every side, each doubt, each objection given its full and fair and honest hearing, before ever he gave his own reply. And this was his way, his deep, quiet, unshakable honesty. He never knocked down a weak and feeble version of an argument he disagreed with. He never took the easy path of fighting a shadow. Instead, he would state the case against his own view as strongly, as fairly, as powerfully as he possibly could. He would gather every reason, every objection, and set them out in their full strength. Sometimes he made the opposing case better than its own defenders ever had, and only then, having given it all of its power, would he gently and thoroughly and kindly answer it. There was a deep fairness in his thinking, a deep humility. He was not trying to win. He was trying to understand. His greatest work, the one above all the others, was a vast book called the Summa Theologica. The name means roughly a summary or a summit of all theology. But do not let that small word summary fool you for a moment. It was enormous. It was a whole ordered universe of questions and answers built patiently, one upon another, reaching from the existence of God high above, all the way down through the nature of the created world, the workings of the human soul, the meaning of goodness and of virtue, and the long, winding shape of a life well lived. He meant it in part as a gentle guide for students, a clear and ordered map to lead a beginner through the whole vast and tangled landscape of faith without getting lost. And here is a remarkable thing, a thing worth resting on for a moment. He never even finished it. Death came before the final pages were written. And yet, even unfinished, even incomplete, it still stands today as one of the towering achievements of the entire human mind, like a great cathedral, left without its final spire, and beautiful even so. Within this great work lies one of his most famous passages of all, what later ages would come to call the 5 ways, 5 separate paths by which Thomas believed the patient human reason could make its way step by step toward the existence of God. We need not follow them closely tonight. You may simply let them drift past like distant lights. But feel the gentle shape of just one of them, softly as you rest. Thomas looked out at the world around him, and he saw that everything moves, everything changes, nothing stays exactly as it is. And he saw that each thing that moves is moved by something before it, which is itself moved by something before that, and that, again, by something before it still, a long chain stretching back and back into the depths of time. And he reasoned, quietly, that this chain cannot stretch backward forever, with nothing at all to begin it. That somewhere, at the very root of everything, there must be a first source of all motion, a first cause, something that itself is unmoved and unbegun, that set all the rest in gentle motion. And this, said Thomas, this first unmoved source of all things, is what we mean when we say the word God. And whether one follows his reasoning all the way to its end or not, see what he was doing. See the heart of it. He was treating the very deepest questions of faith not as things merely to be felt, in a rush of emotion, or merely declared, and never examined, but as things worthy of the most careful, the most rigorous, the most honest thought a human being could give them. He honored faith by bringing to it the full and patient power of the reasoning mind, and he honored reason by aiming it at last at the very highest things there are. That was the great work of his life, the weaving together of the two rivers, the long, patient bringing of peace between the heart and the mind. And yet for all of this, Thomas was never merely a cold machine of logic, grinding out its proofs. This is important to know, if you are to know him at all. He was a man of deep feeling and deeper prayer. Those who lived beside him said that his greatest insights, his clearest moments, came not only from his hours of study, bent over his books, but from long, quiet hours of devotion, when he was stuck fast on some difficult problem, and the answer would not come. It is said that he would not only think, he would go and pray and weep sometimes, and wait in stillness. And then, often, gently, the answer would arrive, like dawn coming slowly to a dark room. And there was another side to him still, softer even than that. Thomas was a poet. He was asked once to compose the words and the hymns for a great feast of the Church. And the hymns that he wrote, all those long centuries ago, are still sung today, still sung 800 years later, in quiet churches, by candlelight, all around the world, gentle, glowing words of wonder and devotion. So the very same hand that wrote those vast, towering, rigorous arguments also wrote tender poetry, meant to be sung softly, in the dark, to comfort the heart. The mind and the heart in Thomas were never truly divided. He lived in himself the very harmony that he spent his whole life trying to describe. And through all of it, through all the fame which grew and grew, through all the towering work, through all the great debates, argued and won before admiring crowds, Thomas remained, in his manner, exactly what he had always been: quiet, humble, gentle, heavy and slow, and unfailingly kind. He did not boast. He did not push himself forward. He did not seek after power, or position, or wealth. He turned down high offices that were offered to him again and again, preferring to remain a simple friar, teaching, writing, praying. He kept all the way to the very end of his life the empty hands that he had chosen as a young man on the day he gave away his inheritance. The fame gathered thick around him like a crowd in a square, and he seemed somehow barely to notice it at all. For he was still at heart the very same boy from the mountain monastery, still asking, beneath everything, the one single, endless, gentle question that he had carried since he was 5 years old. What is God? All the great books, all the careful arguments, all the towering works of his mind were only ever this: a grown man still asking a child's deepest question with all the strength he had. For years upon years, the work poured out of him, steady and unceasing. Books, commentaries on Scripture and on Aristotle, answers to thousands upon thousands of questions, great and small. He taught in Paris and then in Italy, in Rome and in Orvieto, and at last in his own beloved Naples, the bright city by the sea, where the whole story had first begun so many years before. He wrote enough in his not very long life to fill many great heavy volumes, more than most people could ever read in a lifetime, let alone sit down and write. The ox was bellowing now, just exactly as old Albert had promised so long ago in Cologne, and the great sound of it was filling the world. But no life, however bright, stays at its summit forever. The sun climbs, and the sun must also begin, at last, to descend. And as Thomas entered the final years of his story, something was waiting quietly for him, up ahead, on the road. Something that all his vast and patient reasoning could not prepare him for. An experience so deep and so overwhelming that it would silence even him, even that endless, tireless voice. It would make him lay down his pen, the pen that had never once seemed to rest in all those years, and write no more, ever again. What could possibly silence a mind like that? What could be so great that, beside it, even the towering Summa would seem a small and quiet thing? That is the story we will tell, gently, in our final part together. The story of the great silence that came at the end of all his words. But not tonight. Tonight, there is no need to reach for the ending. Tonight, we simply leave him here, at his work, at the height of his long day. Leave him in a quiet room, the candle burning low and golden, a scribe or two sitting near, pens ready, his great, calm, patient mind moving like a slow and certain river, wide and deep, toward the distant sea, at peace, at work, doing the thing he was born to do. So let it rest there for tonight. Let the lecture halls and the royal banquets and the towering books all grow soft and dim and far away. Let the great questions settle quietly around you, like snow falling in the dark, and let them ask nothing of you at all. There is nothing for you to solve tonight, nothing to finish, nothing to hold on to, only to breathe, slow and soft and easy, and to rest and to drift gently down into sleep. Thank you for spending this quiet hour here with me in the quiet Pantheon. Whenever you are ready, and not a moment before, the last part of the story of Thomas will be waiting for you. Warm and dim and patient, like a candle left burning in a window. But not now. Now there is only rest. Now there is only the quiet and the dark and the slow rise and fall of your own breathing. Sleep well, sleep deeply, and good night.